I was just going to say, we're not done yet. And what was interesting, some clever ways to make it sexy and framing. I think Ashley and Jordan have really, within their whole food rescue, food recovery, source reduction, very clever. And yesterday at the Food for Soil, Food for People, Food for Soil workshop, that was our group exercise. What's your big idea? And a lot of good campaign ideas. So I would like to introduce our next and final keynote speakers. Ashley Zanolli is co-lead of the West Coast Climate Materials Management Forum. She's with US EPA Region 10, their Seattle office, where she has worked on air toxics, biofuels, environmental justice, and climate programs since 2006. And Ashley led development of the Food Too Good to Waste. Food Too Good to Waste, it's a community food waste prevention toolkit. And she's also very involved with EPA's Sustainable Food Management Program within the states in EPA Region 10. Jordan Figueiredo, I'm never going to get it right, Jordan, sorry, is a zero waste food advocate. And he is, as likes to say, he's a zero waste professional and food waste geek from California. At his day job, he works with Castro Valley Sanitary District, where he does help businesses, schools, and the community recycle, compost, and reduce waste. And in his spare time, he volunteers for the Northern California Recycling Association. But Jordan and Ashley were key in last October's Zero Food Waste Forum in Berkeley. And also Jordan has been working on the Feeding the 5,000 campaign, and most recently, USA Ambassador for Feedback, which is an organization fighting the food waste scandal around the world. So, Jordan and Ashley, it's all you.
Well, thanks, Nora. It's great to be here with you today, and some tough acts to follow with Reese and Catherine, but I'll give it my best shot. So Jordan and I are here today to talk about how we can cook up climate action through food waste prevention in the US and community collaboration. So I'll start out with a brief background on our current reality. Where are we with the food waste as an issue across the supply chain? Then I'll cover some industry and government actions that have really helped build momentum before turning it over to Jordan to highlight some grassroots efforts, as well as how he's been able to work with others to help elevate awareness on this issue. And then I'll bring it back and close it with some ideas about how we can collaborate across the food system to really promote community resiliency and sustainable food management. So this is a graphic that Nora and BioCycle developed for the workshop we had yesterday on food to people and food to soils. And it's really about how we can create more holistic programs and really close the loop. Unfortunately, we're not quite there yet. In our current reality, up to 40% of our food supply is going uneaten, leading to about 35 million tons of food waste being disposed of in landfills, which is costing us across the supply chain from farm to fork to landfill about $165 billion annually in the US, and contributing to 14% of our domestic greenhouse gas emissions on a life cycle basis. This means that food's the #1 material reaching landfill, and unfortunately it's still the least recovered, with only 5% being recovered for composting to feed our soils. Some estimates say that about 25% of our fresh water resources are used to grow food that's ultimately uneaten at a time when 1 in 6 Americans don't know where their next meal's coming from. And while composting and anaerobic digestion are really great solutions to feed our soils, waste prevention matters. And the cost of tossing out all of that embodied energy and resources that goes to get food to your plate is about 8 to 10 times the cost of disposal. So waste is really just the tip of this iceberg. About 80% of all the environmental impacts of an apple happen before it gets into a truck to go to a grocery store. In California, our breadbasket, where 80% of all our produce is grown, there are some serious water issues as water becomes a more precious commodity. And currently there are about 22 states in a drought. So thus it's really time to rethink our resources today so we can have a better tomorrow, which is the tagline of EPA's Sustainable Materials Management Program. By 2050, a lot of estimates say we'll hit 9 billion people on the planet. The difference in that population growth between now and 2050 is equivalent to the global population of 1950. In addition, about 3.9 million senior citizens currently don't know where their next meal is coming from, and the number of senior citizens is expected to double from 2000 by 2040. So this challenge of feeding people isn't going to get any easier as we work with a reduced land base and soils that have been degraded. So it's really critical to act now because climate change is here, and this nexus that Nora mentioned between water, food, and energy, the demand's only going to increase. So some international agencies estimate that by 2030, we'll have an increase for food and energy demand by about 50% and an increased water demand by 30%, which is really critical because, like I mentioned, 22 states are currently in a drought. So the time is ripe for action. And the Foundation for Social Change, I really appreciate a lot of Robert Reich's talks, the former Secretary of Labor. He talks about how the Foundation for Social Change really lies between the reality we live in and the values we share. So essentially it's time to really take action because this is an issue that requires our urgent attention as 40% of our food supply is currently going eaten. It requires our investment as cities and businesses and consumers are throwing away millions of dollars and avoiding where we could be spending money to feed people instead of landfills and composting inedible food scraps to feed our soils. It's an issue that requires our collaboration since we can go really far together. And I have a lot of experience leading collaborations through the US EPA and have seen a lot of success in businesses, communities, and consumers collaborating across the supply chain. And it's really an issue that requires community action since 40 to 50% of all the food waste is happening at the consumer level in households. Like I mentioned, waste avoidance matters. What we see in terms of waste is just the tip of that iceberg. It's also an issue that requires leadership at all levels. I'm really excited to present with some leaders on the panel today. And lastly, it just requires our creativity and really leveraging knowledge and expertise so we can all hit the ground running a little bit faster. And we can make these values a reality by building on the momentum of some government and industry actions that I'll cover. So starting in 2004, the UK WRAP was formed. It's the Waste to Resources Action Program. And it was formed in a large part by and driven by the 1999 EU Landfill Directive. And that program really focuses on helping businesses and consumers and governments use resources more efficiently and prevent the waste in the first place. In 2004, LeanPath was also founded. I'm sure many of you have seen Andrew Shackman present. And his business model is really focused on helping food service providers measure their waste so that they can reduce it and prevent it in the first place. Starting in 2005, the UK WRAP convened major brand manufacturers, grocers, and governments. The UK WRAP's a nonprofit, but it's really a public-private collaboration. And through this quartile commitment, they set out to accomplish 3 goals. The first one was to reduce the carbon impacts of packaging. They also wanted to reduce food waste across the full supply chain, and then businesses wanted to help consumers take action to reduce food waste in their own homes. From 2005 to 2009, the signatories of this agreement, which include 56 of the largest brand manufacturers and grocery retailers across the world, helped to prevent 1.2 million metric tons of food waste and packaging waste, which WRAP claims is equivalent to about 500,000 around the world flights. They had 3 iterations of this commitment, and in the second version, they prevented 1.7 million metric tons of food and packaging waste, and they're currently in their 3rd process, where they expect to save 1.6 billion pounds in financial savings and prevent 1.1 million metric tons of food and food waste. In 2011, it's also important to point out that the US Food Waste Reduction Alliance was formed, which includes 25 of the largest brand manufacturers and grocery retailers from the Food Marketing Institute, as well as the Grocery Manufacturers Association. And they're really setting out to reduce their environmental footprint while also ending hunger in America. And Nora and I actually both serve as strategic advisors to that group. So just a few quick case studies. In terms of the UK WRAP's Love Food Hate Waste campaign, which was on the previous slide, this was really about helping consumers reduce their avoidable food waste. In the UK, they found that 64% of all the food waste reaching landfills was food that could have been eaten, food that could have fed people. So they worked to provide direct outreach to consumers, focusing on behaviors around perfect portioning, savvy storage, loving your leftovers, and clarifying date labels, for example. They did this through strategic partners like trusted local authorities. Local authorities that participated in cities were able to invest, for every $1 they invested, they saved about $8 on disposal. And overall, they were able to decrease avoidable food waste by about 21%. So really great outcomes. And in the first 2 years, they were actually able to leverage about $15 to $20 million from the grocery retail industry just in their contributions to the marketing campaign. You might want to think, why would grocers participate in a campaign that helps consumers consume less by wasting less? Well, there actually is a business case. And since 2007, they've really seen grocers have increased margins on selling more innovative products that help consumers waste less, like resealable containers for baked beans, which seem to go to waste in the UK. And they've also been able to build brand loyalty by helping consumers stretch their food budgets further. So I really like this graphic because it highlights the holistic programmatic approach to the quartile commitment and the results they were able to achieve by really accessing the power of food. You know, it's something that touches all of us. We all eat. It's how we bond and connect with our families and friends. And through the UK RAP, some of the outcomes they achieved through this approach where they worked across the full life cycle to incorporate strategies for waste prevention and diversion, as well as recycling and composting in order to minimize the amount of waste reaching landfills, and then work upstream with food manufacturers and processors, as well as grocery stores, to drive smarter procurement and increase the economic benefits. So really creating a win-win for businesses and consumers. And since that time, they've been able to reduce food and packaging waste by over 4 million tons. Additionally, governments have really been building momentum and helping to support actions across that full food life cycle. So from cities that have started composting programs at the curb, to states and cities that have rolled out organics bans, to EPA launching our Food Recovery Challenge back in 2010, there's really been a lot of movement. Some international governments have had calls to action. The EU in 2012 called to have food waste. Right now, the UN's negotiating their Millennium Sustainable Development Goals, and they're calling for a similar call to action. And it's worth noting that the USDA and EPA have collaborated on the US Food Waste Challenge, which we're really working to try to drive a fundamental shift in how we think about and manage food and food waste in this country. Some of the drivers to promote prevention, which a lot of these actions really emphasize, are around landfill bans, which I already talked about, including some new states that have followed Connecticut's lead. Also just the cost savings to municipalities, businesses, and consumers who are currently wasting millions to throw away food that could feed people. Some zero waste plans, climate action plans, state solid waste plans, as well as city comprehensive plans have been used to promote prevention efforts. I really like to highlight the King County case study, which includes the city of Seattle where I live, where they found that 33% of all food waste was entering the landfill, and in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, it was found to be the second largest contributor in the county, second only to personal transportation. So there's a lot of opportunity, and new food strategies are really working to leverage healthy eating, food security and food access, water conservation, as well as local economic development, particularly as it pertains to sustainable consumption and production. So USDA and EPA will continue to invest in this area of work to address both the wasted resources and wasted nutrients from wasting food. And this natural nexus will likely become more pronounced as organizations work to leverage resources to meet their mutual environmental goals. And the US EPA has been working on this for a while, like I mentioned. Our administrator, Gina McCarthy, and all of EPA's regions are really invested in EPA's Sustainable Food Management Program, which I'm really proud to be a part of. We work to collaborate across EPA offices, the federal agencies, businesses, and with NGOs to really increase awareness and outreach, support infrastructure development, and provide analytical tools. Through our Food Recovery Challenge, which has been our commercial focus, we're currently working with businesses like Brochures, hotels, colleges and universities, sports and entertainment venues, and now even K-12 schools to inspire future generations like Reese talked about. And we're challenging them to prevent their waste in the first place through source reduction, our highest potential for cost savings and environmental benefits, and then to get more food to people instead of feeding landfills, and finally feed our soils. And for the last 4 years, I've been leading the development of the Food to Good to Waste program, which Nora mentioned. So this program was designed using community-based social marketing principles, and it's really focused on 5 key waste prevention behaviors. Sorry, it's cut off at the end. But the first step is really to measure to see how much food and money you're wasting. So whether this is a program you can implement through your organization or in partnership with businesses, it doesn't really matter because these are all really simple actions we can all take in our own home. Also smart shopping, think about what you have on hand before you go to the store and how much you actually need. Smart storage to help keep our fruit and vegetables lasting longer. Smart prep, so you're more likely to whip up midweek meals. And smart savings, so you really eat what you buy. And this has been one of our most popular tools. You just put this eat first sign in your fridge on a shelf where you store items that are about to go bad, and you're more likely to eat them because they're not out of sight and out of mind. In terms of results, I've personally been working over the last 3 years to help 15 different communities implement 17 different campaigns. We really focused on fitting this toolkit within existing programs using a similar model to the Love Food Hate Waste program I talked about in the UK. And it's really designed around behavior change, which is both social and local. In terms of outcomes, I'm very excited to share with you that based on our evaluation results, we found that it's possible for households to reduce preventable food waste, food that could have fed people, by over 50% by weight, or half a pound per person per week. And 96% of all participants plan to continue using these strategies. The greatest places to implement these strategies are in places where people are already interacting with food, places like community kitchens, farmers markets, grocery stores, and school lunchrooms. So now I'll turn it over to Jordan since you've heard about some of the success at the industry and business levels, to talk about the momentum he's been building at the grassroots.
Great. So you've heard Ashley detail some trends and a lot of actions, but so much has been really happening lately. A lot of my food waste geek friends and myself are starting to call this a movement. And really, when you consider where we've been and where we're at now, I mean, 30 years ago, we had almost no recycling programs around the country. Today, it's about 9,000 curbside recycling programs. So in terms of looking at food waste and the solutions to it, we don't have to let our past experience define our future. And really, food waste is now. I know we've had some things going on for maybe 10 years plus, whatever, but food waste, there's so much momentum building right now that we can really access this power of food and really put it into the minds of the general public and make some true action. So, some recovery and community efforts. These are just touching on a few of the notables over the last several years. AmpleHarvest.org started their program in 2009, and basically what that is, it's a website that accesses local gardens or your home garden and your surplus that you might have. Some people have huge orchards, and you can donate that produce to a food bank or a food pantry through this technology. And since then, there's been quite a few technologies that have popped up around recovery. And then in 2009, Tristram Stewart published Waste: Uncovering the Global Food Waste Scandal. So I volunteer for his organization now, and it was one of the seminal books in this sort of higher solutions to food waste movement. And then Feeding the 5,000 started in 2009, and that was actually the event that he created to show this issue. So feeding 5,000 people in a public square food that would have been wasted because of certain cosmetic or system reasons, and then making it a festival and an awareness event. And another big thing that's been popping up is food rescue groups. So in the US, we have these millennials of baby boomers that are sort of building on this world that they didn't create, that they don't necessarily approve of, and taking it on themselves to sort of do social entrepreneurship, where mostly it's volunteer driven, but businesses popping up all over the US to recover the food that maybe the food banks can't get to for whatever reason. In case you didn't know, only 10% of good surplus food is recovered in the US, so there's plenty of opportunity for this, and it's really something unique to the US. I've talked to people in other countries, and they say, food rescue groups, what are you talking about? We have pantries, we have food banks, but these rescue groups, such as Urban Gleaners, Food Shift, Boulder Food Rescue, 0%, Rescuing Leftover Cuisine is actually popping up in different areas, Keep Austin Fed. They're really recovering a lot of good food for those in need that otherwise would be going in landfill mostly, sometimes compost. So then Feeding the 5,000, again, that event I told you started about 6 years ago. I managed the first one in the US in Oakland last year, and one of the key functions, again, with bringing people together, diverse groups, nonprofits, schools, waste groups, or recycling groups, bringing them all together to talk about higher solutions and feed people in a public square. We were in downtown Oakland, this beautiful setting in front of the city hall. It was a whole event where we had music and chef demos and all these different solutions to really engage people on the issue. But social media was huge for that event. So it's new to the US, and people didn't really know what we were doing. Some people started asking me, wait, you're feeding people? Okay, can I donate? And it wasn't, giving for charity. It was showing food that's going to go to waste, not to a food bank, but that we can still use something, use it for something and feed people. So social media was huge in passing on the word. We didn't get much press. People didn't know what it was. And the partnerships were amazing to put that together. Really a lot of work went into it. Luckily, I did sort of electronically or digitally know some people that could pass on the word. So Michael Pollan and Alice Waters were really nice and told people to come to the event, which helped a lot, and pass it on. Michael Pollan even worked on his new food rule number 84, which is his only food waste food rule, with us, and it was called Take Back Your Plate. And again, that's accessing the power of food to really bring celebrity or bring the popular public consciousness to the issue where otherwise they might not think of food waste. Some items to elevate the conversation over the last so many years. I know when I read American Wasteland, when I was working on composting for businesses, it just completely shook me. Since then, I've been pounding my head against the wall against my government day job, trying to get food waste prevention and recovery into the mix, and it's now getting there. But this massive visceral imagery that he presented with a Rose Bowl stadium filled with food waste every day that really just stuck with us. And then Dana Gunders did her wasted report out of the NRDC that really brought it into a smaller version, obviously, for people that don't read books, made it really accessible, and it was just passed on and interviewed, and it's been used so many times and referenced so many times ever since. It's been so important. And then she presented it on the keynote at BioCycle in 2013, a really big moment for me because I met Ashley and I met Dana, and then that led to the Zero Food Waste Forum. And also, I'll cover that in a little bit, also New York Times has published some articles recently on food waste, quite a few actually, which is a big deal because normally we don't get big publications to make that much noise about it. NPR's published articles on our ugly fruit and veg, which I'll talk about in a little bit, or uglies. And then even some celebrity chefs are now starting to talk about food waste and make it an issue. Dan Barber had his Wasted New York pop-up restaurant serving food that would have been wasted, scraps and heads and pickle butts and all these kinds of things. So the Zero Food Waste Forum was a concept I brought to Dana Gunders that I thought we need to do a one-day event on higher solutions to food waste to really get at those massive impacts that we're talking about with hunger, with environmental issues, water, of course, in California, that's a really big deal, energy, all these things that have such a higher impact when you prevent the food from being wasted or even composted. So it kept getting bigger and bigger, working with Dana and working with lots of other folks, and people were so excited. It became a couple days, and then there were some other events, and Jonathan Bloom ended up calling it the Woodstock of food waste. Yeah, I was never letting go of that quote. I can say that over and over again, yeah. And then we had 16 states attending, over 40 co-sponsors, many segments of the industry in the room for the first time talking about issues maybe they would never even talk about. Waste haulers talking about food waste prevention. And then, of course, since we had all these people there, I thought, Ashley, let's do a workshop. We can't let them go. Let's drill down and get to the real heart of the issue. We had kind of the inspiration on the first day. The second day was more the heart of the issue. And to plug this a little more, I'll have a panel later today that you can hear all about this in more detail. Food for soil, food for people, or food for people, food for soil. So the workshop focused on the real issues we need to overcome, the challenges, and we came out with 3 priorities: consumer awareness, policies, and measurement, to build on to make 2015 the year against food waste. So what was the forum? We were walking the talk on food. We had mostly recovered food that would not have gone to people or compost, would have gone to landfill. From Food Shift and Falling Fruit, we had a really diverse program. We had the US premiere of Just Eat It, a really great documentary with this lovable couple that eats on food waste, basically, or food that would have been wasted for 6 months. No food from stores. They're now just touring the world, and it's won many awards, so it's a great documentary. We had technology. We called it Zapping Food Waste. We had technology around the solutions, great governmental solutions like Montgomery County, Food Too Good to Waste. We had many different cities from Food Too Good to Waste there. It was great. Stop Waste and Lean Path, working on prevention in kitchens. Eureka Recycling, a hauler talking about prevention on their day-to-day work. And then Bon Appetit Management Company with their great Produce Seconds program, or Imperfectly Delicious. And again, reeling in stakeholders was the key. Bringing people together into the room. These were all of our sponsors, but really there was a lot more there too. But as you can see, it's governments, nonprofits, haulers, businesses. They're not all listed there, but it was really a great group. And again, the idea was getting a frank dialogue going, open, just have discussions on the issues, not worried about what your boss might think of it, if your boss wasn't there, hopefully. Making it around food, like, again, bringing in the power of food. So that's some of the recovered food. I think on the left is stuff that actually came out of a dumpster, so we did tell people if you didn't want to eat it, there it is. Dumpster diving is really common in the Bay Area, in case you aren't aware. It's just no big deal. Yeah, really. And then for a plug for our friends with Just Eat It, it will be on MSNBC on Earth Day, in case you have a chance to watch it at 10 Eastern. Great documentary, so tell everybody you know. It's unfortunately not available just to watch online yet, so this is your next best chance. Then came Ugly Fruit and Vegetables, my pet project right now that I really love and is kind of taking over my life. If I pick up my phone during this presentation, that's why. So in case you didn't know, as much as 40% of all produce in the US goes uneaten, and mostly the reason is cosmetic standards imposed by grocers on size, shape, color, weight, all those kinds of things. And one of the reasons why this is so important is obviously we produce so much produce in the US, California, especially where I come from. And in Europe, they've really been taking action around this issue. They've had sort of a boom in selling ugly fruits and vegetables. I think 2012 was the highest grossing or highest growing market in produce was ugly fruits and vegetables in the UK. And then that Inglorious Fruits and Vegetables campaign with the sexually suggestive produce from France last year. Did anybody see that? Yeah, that was just everywhere. And since then, 5 different grocers in France, 7 other countries in Europe have started, and they're all making it fun. Canada has even started selling some ugly fruits and vegetables. Australia, it's really been exploding. But is any major retailer in the US selling it? No. So what can we do? I thought, okay, can we make this fun? Can we create some awareness, but also engage people who would not care about food waste? And of course, can we connect that juicy, foodie movement that, again, they don't really talk about food waste, but they have so much attention drawn to them. So that's why I started at Ugly Fruit and Veg, a social media campaign that really promoted the issue in a sense that there was pictures and there's messaging that makes it fun, but also educating people on this issue all around the world, not just making it fun. And it was posted, I post pictures and imagery of like these celebrity fruits and vegetables that look like a thumb or a hip-hop carrot. That's what he is right there. He's called hip-hop carrot. And the support has been crazy. And since December, I started this, and then in early January, Jamie Oliver was doing some food waste shows and decided to retweet 4 of my posts and absolutely blew up my phone. I was just like looking at it one day, and I think it burned like the case or something. It was nuts. And so once he took notice of it, I'm like, well, maybe I should ask some of these other people I barely know, like Michael Pollan or Alice Waters, Civil Eats, even Gail Simmons. It was crazy. I asked all these people, hey, can you support this? And they did. They just reposted it right away. And that really helped a lot in January, building the momentum. And since then, it's now this grassroots effort all around the world, about 50% North America, and then 30% UK, and the rest just everywhere. It's like 95 countries now, and it's insane people that are following. I have no idea how they find out about it in Qatar or Dubai, but they do. So it's been 25,000 retweets and favorites since January, 17 million retweet reach. There's a Facebook and an Instagram, which is real fun with the images. And the press, they've been eating it up. Food pun. Yeah, they've been eating it up. I've had like 20 to 30 interviews over the last month and a half on this because they just love this. And otherwise, they wouldn't give me the time of day to talk about food waste, about feeding the 5,000, about the forum, nothing. Wouldn't talk about it. But now I can talk about all those things because of this. We actually call it the Trojan horse, our food waste geek friends. So, yeah, shh, don't tell the media that. So, the press, it was mentioned in the New York Times, featured in NPR, Tree Hugger, On Earth. There's some international articles where they didn't even contact me and they just wrote an article. So luckily I found out about that. That was pretty cool. And the pictures, crack up produce, right? So this is what Ugly Fruit and Veg mostly is. It's pictures, shapely pictures that might look like certain celebrities that really annoy us, but anyway. That I post every day, certain 3 to 4, and then there's articles and whatnot. This is really what draws people in. But the overall messaging is that it's what's inside that counts, that look, ugly fruit and veg is not really ugly. It's nutritious, it's healthy, and it's good to go.
So we're almost done. I'm just going to bring us home with some ideas on how we can promote community resiliency and build off of all the success that Jordan's had with social media and the momentous actions that we just discussed. So social networks are not social media, although social media has been a really great tool that Jordan just talked about. And social networks are really critical to driving lasting behavior change and achieving collaborative outcomes. I've been working hard for the last 5 years to achieve collaborative outcomes by creating holistic programs that tie together prevention, waste management, and food recovery efforts, and working strongly in partnership with grocery and food service sectors as well as with schools. So I hope to see that trend really continue. There's also some opportunities to work with different communities. Some of the pilots that we conducted in Gresham, Oregon, and the state of Rhode Island really found that low-income families were excited to engage in this. And working with USDA, they've found that people who are low income, who save money by wasting less, can rethink what's affordable and purchase healthier. I've also done some interesting work with faith-based communities. There's an initiative out of the White House. I've also been working with Sustainable America on their I Value Food where they're implementing sustainable food management programs with over 40 congregations in Connecticut. And another interesting group is the K through 12 schools, where EPA is now really committed to working with them through our Food Recovery Challenge, so we can really inspire a future generation.